Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us another special guest, and he goes by the name of Blake Williams. Now, Blake is a unique case because he was a nurse, cardiac, cath lab, critical care, and surgery nurse that got into medical sales, decided to get into medical device sales within neuromodulation, and then worked his way up to field sales trainer, and then got to do research in neuromodulation. And it was a pretty fast experience, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. It's a fascinating journey he's been on, and you absolutely want to listen to this episode. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that are doing things a little differently in the medical sales space, and I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hey, Blake, how we doing today?
Fantastic, Samuel. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Blake, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
All right. So I am Blake Williams. Contrary to popular belief, I do live in Michigan. My accent kind of throws everybody off with that, but born and raised in West Virginia, as I'm representing there. But I am a field clinical engineer, and that title doesn't really paint the full picture of what that is. There's people with different backgrounds with that. People come from sales, clinical, engineers. So a lot of different people are in that role.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And you're fun. It's funny because Detroit, and I'm like, this guy does not sound like he comes from Detroit. So thank you for clearing that up. How long have you been in Detroit?
So I moved up right around 2011. I got a nursing job at the time in Ann Arbor at the Veterans Hospital there, and I put in about 12 years of nursing. It was a great career. Loved working at the VA. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So nursing to engineer. So we'll get into the history, but before we do that, let's establish exactly what you do. So your title is Senior Field Clinical Engineer. Why don't you tell the audience, a lot of people listening to this episode, they've never been in medical sales. They're clueless. So tell the audience, what exactly does that mean? And what exactly does that mean in the context of a traditional medical sales role?
So for me, I've always been based in neuromodulation. So our field clinical engineers are what we call expert consultants in the field of neuromodulation. So that is spinal cord stimulators, deep brain stimulators, sacral neuromodulation within the company of Medtronic is my experience. But we deal with a lot of the new technology, the research side of things. We interact with sales, marketing, medical affairs, and we cover from a national standpoint. So I just got back from New York. I'll go out to California. So I travel the nation weekly to assist with procedures and help physicians.
Got it. So then in your team and within neuromodulation, there's a sales rep and there's an engineer who you are. So you actually work alongside an actual sales rep.
Yep, we do. Yep. But a lot of us, our background comes from sales. I was on the sales side in the sacral neuromodulation business prior to coming over to the field clinical engineer. They like those people because we know a lot about the technology. We know how to interact with physicians, so they bring us over.
Okay, so talk to us a little bit about that. So is becoming a field clinical engineer an aspiration of a sales rep, or is that just strictly?
It can be. It absolutely can be. So if you're asking, it was a promotion for me. Absolutely. It gives a lot of bandwidth with our leadership. I've been able to interact with leadership way more than when I was on just solely the sales side.
Got it.
So that's the benefit.
So the sales rep selling, what are you doing? Walk us through your day-to-day.
That's a loaded question, Samuel. I will say our day-to-day, it varies so much. It would be it'd be impossible for me to pick one particular day. But so really what we do is we work with a lot of pre-market technology, investigational devices, or honing in on what we already have that's post-market and making it better. So for us, we do work with marketing because it is pre-marketing stuff and launch. We work with sales in the aspect of finding out where the best areas for research are, like who are the docs that are the top implanting docs in whatever particular state. And then we assist with training the physician. So a lot of what I do, because we are considered the expert consultant, we go and teach the physician on a new product or a new implant technique and work with them in that regard.
Got it. So I'm sales rep Joe, and I find Dr. B, and I get Dr. B to utilize device A, and you step in, and then I say, okay, Dr. B's using it, but you know what? I think you can do a lot more with this. I'm going to call Blake. Blake's going to have a discussion with Dr. B to help him find new ways to use the therapy, maybe introduce devices that I don't sell that he didn't even know about. Am I along the lines of what your role does?
There is a lot of it that the sales reps can help identify the best institutions. Like obviously everybody wants like the University of Michigan health systems and the Cleveland clinics and the Mount Sinai. The great part about the sales reps being able to, and the district sales manager. So I would say that I work more with the regional sales managers and the district sales managers than I do the sales reps.
Okay.
So that was what I was mentioning as far as the bandwidth with leadership. We work more with the higher up aspect of the leadership team.
Got it. Okay. So in your position, how is your performance measured?
It's a great question too. So we have a lot to do with, so before when I was on the sales side for InterStim, our sacral neuromodulation, obviously that is salary and commission. This particular role is more of a salary with, we call it a MIP, a Medtronic Incentive Plan. That's over the whole company and based on how all of neuromodulation is doing. So if we're getting out the research and we're helping with these launches, then that is going to be how we're measured, that everything is rolling along and the operating unit is exceeding. That's how we're measured.
So just so just so our audience here can have complete context, what is a perfect, if everything went right and you're just like, man, I'm killing it. And Blake, honestly, I already know you're killing it, but if you just had an amazing quarter and you're like, wow, this is the best. What's happening?
We all of our data collection is great. Implants are going well. Our sites are running smoothly. FDA is happy with all of our results. And then our DMs are expressing that the physicians are happy with how everything's going too. So to be a PI, an investigator that we use on the research side, it's a lot of work for the physicians. And so they want to be involved in research, obviously, because that's highly touted, but it takes a lot. And so if everybody's happy, that really, you know what, Samuel, I would say that's what an FCE's job is, making everybody happy. That is their goal. Easy task.
I'll take it. So then, I'm curious, when you were a sales rep, I'm sure you had an amazing relationship with a few providers. When you got promoted, did some of them come out and say, hey, Blake, get me in? Blake, come on. Remember when I got you to your,
Yes.
blew out your numbers in quarter one, hook me up. Like, is that happening?
Oh, absolutely. And there's been a kind of a paradigm shift. There's always been like what we call separation of church and state from research and sales.
Okay.
But they can work together. That's what we said. Everybody wants what's best for the patient, right? That's the main thing. And so they want to make sure that the data is great and the appropriate kind of data. So we have had a shift with our new medical director of affairs. His name's Omar Abdulhadi, fantastic guy. Mm-hmm. He has really helped us be more forward facing. And so we are able to have those relationships with physicians and talk to the people that want to be involved and navigate that. So I have a lot of relationships with physicians, which it does. You do have to say no to a couple just because you can't have everybody, right?
Right, you can't have everybody. So you're a pretty hot commodity then when you're walking into certain institutions because they're that's the guy.
Yeah,
that's the guy.
Or you could be hated because you haven't been able to get them what they want yet, right? But no, for the most part, it's great. Everybody understands, and it's the lay of the land right now. So, but it's been great.
Okay, so let's build out the full team. So there's you, who's the field clinical engineer. Mm-hmm. There's a sales rep. Who else makes up the team?
So our direct team, there's 13 of us FCEs, field clinical engineers, and then we have some management which is we have 2 managers, and then it's such a broad team. It's hard to divvy all that up because we work
Sure.
with medical affairs, medical science liaisons. So we have a lot of different people involved, but really, like I said, the district sales managers are incredibly important in this particular to navigate the research and where we need it. So in our particular team, like I'm national, but we try to be somewhat regional. So for me, I look at like a 4-hour window. I do Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, eventually Toronto. Like, so there's some areas that we cover. Just we try to get a 4-hour block. So I
Yeah.
work with those district sales managers.
And you said you're traveling every week?
We do, yeah. We travel every week. The bandwidth has been awesome. Like I'm just due to some like NDAs and stuff, I can't disclose exactly who, but we work with some smaller startup companies, and that has been awesome. You know, I'm meeting
Yeah.
CEOs of these smaller startup companies and
Yeah.
learning too much about
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
we travel all over the place.
Wow. So, if someone was to ask, hey, how much travel am I going to be doing if I was to step into a field clinical engineer role, what would you say?
I would say you're looking at probably 3 overnights a week. I would say, it's not
3 overnights a week.
yeah, it's
You
not
make it sound like that's light.
it's got ebbs and flows to it, and sometimes it's just so cool. Like the funny thing about me is being from West Virginia, I
Yeah.
grew up in a real small town, and we
Yeah.
did not travel much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I came onto the team, like I didn't have Uber app, I didn't have Delta points, like I didn't have
You're
all
like, my
this
whole
stuff.
world was just
Yeah,
expanded.
yeah.
That's
So
cool.
it's been great to travel. Like
Yeah.
it is a lot though.
So do you have a family?
I do. Yep. I got two boys, 6-year-old and a 12-year-old,
Okay.
and a wife.
So you're like me, man. Mine are 8 and 13. So you're 3 overnights a week with a 6 and 12 and a wife. How do you make it work?
That last part you said, the wife, she's very instrumental in that. She was a nurse as well,
Sure.
and then after COVID, we made the decision for her to stay home for a bit to help with the kids, and just it makes life a lot easier.
Okay.
And when I got into Medtronic, being that my salary did increase from what I was making for a nurse, it allowed us to have her stay home, which was huge. She manages all that. She manages the sports and the house and the kids, and so it's a team effort, but she's a
Yeah.
lot of the team.
But she helps you make it work. Is she still in nursing or she's not working?
So right now her dad's an engineer, oddly enough, not the same kind of engineer I am. He's an electrical engineer, but they own their own company, and she helps out there
Yeah.
about 3 days a week. So
Oh,
it
nice.
allows
Okay.
for her to make sure the kids get to school and all that.
Awesome. Okay. So field clinical engineer. Now, is this like, let's think about one of our listeners and they're like, wow, this guy's doing the coolest stuff ever. How do I do that? Can you have an ambition to go from outside the industry to field clinical engineer? Or do you need to become a sales rep first? Or do you have to have a nursing degree? What allows you to do what you do today?
I love that question. And so it is open. It's all open. So we have people on our team that had 0 sales experience prior to coming in. They were engineers by trade,
Sure.
or they came from research,
Wow.
like they at academic institutions.
Sure.
We do have a lot of sales reps on our team though. And so really there's nurses there. We have a chiropractor on our team.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so it really is, I was fortunate enough to be connected to the hiring manager, and he brought me over, gave me a call and said he'd love to have me on the team. And I joined, and that's how I
Rest is history.
here. Yeah. Rest is
All right.
history.
So let's get into that history and then we'll talk a little bit more about your current role. So take us back, man. You're in college. You're obviously wanting to become a nurse because you went to get a nursing degree, right?
Yes, sir.
You go to college, you get your nursing degree. You're a nurse now. What happened next?
Well, it's so funny. I tell people all the time. So I graduated from West Virginia University with my bachelor's.
Okay.
And then at the time, West Virginia just wasn't paying a ton. So I moved to Kentucky. I worked in Kentucky. My first nursing job was in a cardiac cath lab. And in walks this guy, super charismatic, carrying some donuts. And I was like, this dude is like talking to the physicians. I'm like, what is this guy doing? And so at the time, before Abbott became what they are, it was a St. Jude rep.
Okay.
And I was like, I want to be that dude. And so in my mid-20s at this point, and so that was my goal. And I did my nursing and did ICU and procedural, cardiac cath lab, EP lab, different things. And I always kept on thinking like, maybe I should jump into medical sales, right? Like that's where I wanted to be, but it's scary because nursing, you always got a job,
right?
You don't have to worry about that. With that, it's, medical sales is a lot more volatile. And I will say, I did interview for straight out the gate, probably about 4 years ago. I interviewed with the company for a full-fledged sales rep within pacemaker world. Very competitive. I made it all the way to my very last interview. It was me and one other guy, and they ended up going with the other guy. He had experience. I had zero, none. In the sales world. And it was the first time that I've ever really been turned down for a job, because in nursing, kind of get them, right?
Yeah, you're like, this is easy. Whatever I want, I'll get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that, it was a little bit humbling.
Your ego was checked at the door.
100%. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to look for a little bit. And you know how they say sometimes just blessings comes when you least expect it, right? And I was working in the PACU at the VA hospital, and a InterStim sales rep heard me talking with some patients and some of the physicians, and she was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting into the medical device industry?"
Cool. Yeah.
And I was like, "Yes, I have." And she's like, "Well, I'm going to give my manager your name, and you'll expect a call." You hear that sometimes, and you don't think anything's going to come about.
Right.
But a week later, I got a call, and I had the absolute. I got a name dropper. She just recently retired, but Liz Ezzo was my manager, and she was phenomenal. I really owe a lot to her.
Yeah.
Because she took a chance on me.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, the rest is history.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. That's beautiful. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what someone can expect. Give us, what's the salary range for neuromodulation? What's the salary range for what you currently do today?
Okay, so neuromodulation in general, I tell everybody that's the future. Like, we're basically living in those sci-fi movies we watched when we were kids. Like, everybody's bionic now, right? And I wholeheartedly believe in neuromodulation. But the big thing is, I think right now it's about a $5 billion industry, and by 2027 they project it to be about 10 billion. So the money is there for neuromodulation. There's so many companies, startups, big conglomerates. But what I would say from a salary standpoint is, obviously the sales rep aspect. You're going to make more money at the startups. Like, it's just that's a fact. That's what's going to, you see that a lot, and you see people leave the larger companies and go there, but there's more risk.
Right.
So on the FCE side, it is you're looking at anywhere between like a 130 to 200. Like, there's, depending on how much experience you have, depending on what kind of background you had prior to coming in. And then on the sales side, you're looking at less from a salary standpoint, more on the commission based. So, and really it was a similar range in the 200s, when you're on the sales and you're hitting quota. When I first came on, my partner, she was fantastic, taught me everything I knew about sales. And I've been that's what I want to tell people that listen to you, is like, sometimes it's just who you fall into with. And I was blessed with awesome leadership, great partners. And so for me, that's what helped me to succeed. And so we were crushing our quotas. We never missed quota in the, what was it? Because I was there for about a year and a half. It was about 7, maybe 8 quotas that we never missed. One time we were 177% to plan.
Wow.
And, it felt great.
Absolutely.
So we both moved on. I moved into the FCE role, and then my partner, Christy Slastargic, she moved into the spine marketing world. So, Samuel, I feel like there's 2 different kinds of people, right? There's the people that love chasing that quota, and for a while that can be fun. And then for a while you decide you want to do something else. And that's what led me to that FCE role.
I love it. So let's talk about that. One thing, I've talked to a few people in neuromodulation, even on the show, and a few people that, one thing they share with me is that in certain, like deep brain stimulation, for example, you get to work with the providers and you really get to work with the patients. I mean, to the point where you're going to, patient groups and you're literally recruiting patients for procedures and surgery. Do you get to do some of that in your role, or is it a different side of things?
In our role, we don't have so much on the recruitment. The other teams are taking care of that. So that is being funneled for us, but we do have complete like engagement with the patients. And so I think a lot of people feel when someone leaves a job like nursing or whatever healthcare position they might have had, that they won't have any patient interaction anymore.
Right.
And I couldn't disagree more.
Wow.
And so honestly, I would say that I have more of a global effect on that now.
Wow.
And it's been amazing for me. And I meet some great patients, and we can enhance their lives. And we are responsible for that. So it's very, very beneficial.
So if you can share, please give us what's one of the most impactful experiences you've had in this role where you got to see what your work did for a patient.
So in our InterStim division, some OAB, bladder disorders, things like that are things that people don't really think about being life affecting, right? But they can be, because it really affects the confidence of the person or just their ability to live a normal life. And I had worked with a younger female patient. She was in her 20s and had really held off on like love and life. And,
Wow.
as a result of that. And so we had a physician that didn't have the typical like OAB is for old ladies kind of thing. Like she wanted to help out all her patients. And so we implanted a device on a younger female. And about a year later, we stayed in touch. And she told me how she was doing amazing, and she was getting to the point where she was going to be getting married and
Wow.
kids were going to be in the future. And so this was
Wow.
all based on neuromodulation. And so
Wow.
those things are huge.
Yeah.
Like you affected that person's life and then everybody's life around them.
So you literally got to see the impact on the quality of life.
Yes.
Just because there are so many listeners that are listening right now that have no idea what neuromodulation means, can you just describe for us what she was experiencing, or what a patient like her was experiencing, and then what they were able to do after the procedure and the implant?
Of course. When you think of like overactive bladder, I feel like a lot of people think of old ladies, like I said,
Yeah.
and
Vesicare is the first thing that comes to mind. Yes.
so they have leaking, and
Right.
as you see all these ads for like feminine pads that women
Yep.
wear just because
Adult diapers and whatnot.
exactly,
Yep.
100%. And we try to normalize wearing those, and sometimes they have to, like
Sure.
it's true. But for them, it's like embarrassing,
Right.
and it's expensive to go through all of the diapers that they go through. Like there's a lot of different aspects of that. And so sometimes medications work and sometimes medications do not.
Right.
And for our patient population, we can put in this device. They have a trial first. That's the big thing, is they test them and they make sure that this is going to work. It's a temporary trial. We check everything out. Is this going to help that patient?
Right.
And once we get those results and it says yes, it's going to be helped. Honestly, because it's temporary, when we get ready to take out the temporary leads, some of the patients are like, no, like I don't want it removed, right?
Right. Like, no, keep me on this. Yeah.
Yes. And so once we implant that, it can really drastically improve their life from multiple facets.
For a young woman, I can only imagine that is completely life-changing.
Yes.
That's a beautiful story. This makes me wonder, are there therapies that a provider or even you're thinking, wait a minute, this would be so beneficial if we could use it here, and it hasn't been done yet? Are you empowered to kind of create a pathway for that? Is there a provider that you go to, or do providers come to you and say, oh my gosh, Blake, we have to try this here? How does that work? Or does that even happen?
That is also a great question. And so this is the benefit of startup companies, right? The startup companies can navigate FDAs and things of that nature a little quicker. And so there are tons of scientists and little think tank companies that can come up with new indications for whatever device it may be.
Yep.
And so physicians do have some input. Physicians might be like, there is a particular disorder, an autoimmune disease, or something that nature that we think that this could help. What can we do about that? And so these smaller companies can look into that, and they can take that and run with it. So there are a lot of, without getting into too much, because I can't share too much on some of the things.
I understand.
But what you said is true, though. They do come up with potential ideas.
So is it mainly then a company like as large as Medtronic sees an opportunity and then looks for a startup that's already in that space to see if there is a pathway.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's how
that
it
can
works.
be a
Okay.
thing. Or there are startup companies that reach out to Medtronic and like, hey, we got a great idea. Like
Got it.
this is what we're doing. What do you think? And so I wish I was high up enough to say that I'm the guy that makes those decisions. I am not. But it's kind of just how it goes. It's a two-way street, and it can be very beneficial to the
You're
patient.
coming back to do a follow-up episode when you get there. Like,
All right,
mark
exactly.
my words.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I say
So
that.
so then, what I really want to know is what's the barriers to access for new pathways? Is it a long, arduous process? Like, for example, when you want to use a new drug for a disease state, I mean, you're looking at years. Even if it's an obvious choice, you're looking at years for the FDA to say, okay, clinical trials have to be on point. The p-value has to be significant enough. I mean, you got a lot of stuff you got to make sure is in line before you even can tamper in the commercial market. Is it the same kind of thing with these devices, or is there a little bit more flexibility because of how impactful these devices can be in certain conditions?
I wish it was the last part that you said, but honestly, I would say it's even more stringent because
Okay.
neuromodulation requires an implant, right? Like that's going
Right.
into the patient's
Right.
body. So when they're looking at research studies or the risk that it poses to the patient, then it's very stringent. The FDA, it's very arduous, as you mentioned. So that rightfully so. Like I understand it. It's just sometimes it does get exhausting and how much, but they mean well. Like,
Right.
but it's a very long process.
I can imagine. Now, share what you can. Is there any research, or do you know of any research that's being done with neuromodulation and hyperhidrosis?
I actually don't. I would share something if I had something. That one I don't have much from my standpoint.
Sure. Yeah, just curious. Okay. If you can share, and again, this is just for context for the audience, what's a unique space that people just don't think about neuromodulation playing a significant role in?
Well, I think one of the biggest, the newest right now is if you've seen the company, it's for sleep apnea. And so there's a company out right now that is working on some it's neuromodulation. But if anybody that's listening suffers from sleep apnea, they know that the masks, your Darth Vader mask that you have on, is cumbersome and nobody wants to wear it. So they came up with one that stimulates the hypoglossal nerve. This is not a Medtronic company, but it's something that's newer that's came out. And really, another big new thing is you'll see the companies like Saluda and various companies that are coming out with what we call closed loop stimulation. And I think that is the future of a lot of neuromodulation for various companies.
Talk to us about that. What's closed loop?
So the easiest way to describe it is when you think current neuromodulation and stimulation, you hit a controller and you increase an amplitude, you increase the voltage, so to speak. There's a lot of nuances to the patient doing it themselves, and if they do too much, too little, not enough. So really, if you think about closed loop from like an artificial intelligence standpoint, I relate it to that in real-time data and your body responding to it, and then the stimulation responding to it. This is what I said, we're living in sci-fi movies now.
Talk to us, man.
I think about it like a thermostat in your house. So you set a thermostat at a predetermined number, like let's say 70, which is what my wife likes. It's too hot for me, but we'll say 70, and the house gets 71. Thermostat kicks on, the air conditioner kicks on, pulls it back down to the specified amount, right? So it's ebbing and flowing based on that preset number. So with closed loop stimulation for these companies that are working on that is, let's say, spinal cord simulators, like I mentioned, Saluda is doing that now. And they look at the real-time data the signals coming from the spinal cord, and the neuromodulation device recognizes it and adjusts accordingly. It's massive to me.
That's huge. Yeah. Wow. We are living we're living in the future.
It's true. It really is. You see Star Trek and all these movies. It's like that. It's pretty amazing to be part of it.
So as an engineer, do you get to have input into some of the technologies that are currently being created that are out yet?
Yep, they do. We have some great people on our team that have a lot of experience in that. So on our team of the 13, I had the most pelvic health. So for sacral neuromodulation, we had other people that had the most spinal cord stimulator training, other people that were the deep brain experts. So we have a wide array of us that all kind of work together. But we do have input on those things, whether it's things coming to market and what we feel like a programmer should have on it
Sure.
from adjustment purposes, or what the implant should look like based on our real world pre-launch scenarios. So we do have some input, which it's great to be part of that too.
That is very cool. Very cool. All right, let's talk about what does it take to be a top tier neuromodulation sales rep. And you know what? Let me ask you two questions. What does it take to be a top tier field clinical engineer? And then go ahead and share with us what it takes to be a top tier sales rep.
So I know a lot of people might disagree. You know, you get people that recommend reading the Challenger and all these things. But to me, both sides, authenticity is huge. You can have difficult conversations whether you are a soft-spoken individual or not. So to me, in both fields, being on point, being representing the company's mission and always putting the patients first is the ultimate aspect that the physicians will all that will look at.
Absolutely.
So to me, I think being authentic, showing up when you say you're going to show up, and then, you know, doing what you would want done for you is what I think for both. Like there are some people that's going to say, you know, being the aggressive challenger kind of person is what you have to be for a sales. And I'm sure that works for some people. For me, my history of being a nurse and interacting with physicians in that regard and seeing them as the people that they are greatly benefited me. I feel the same way with my FCE role, as I have the ability to relate to the physicians and the patients. And I tell everybody I got that Southern grandma living in me. Like I could be everybody's friend. And so it served me well.
Absolutely. That is fantastic. So neuromodulation, I think, is becoming a more popular space. I can literally sit here and say 4 years ago, the awareness of neuromodulation just wasn't where it is today. I mean, it's amazing to me how explosive neuromodulation is becoming. And you literally reinforce that belief when you're saying that it's going from a $5 billion industry to on its way to being a $10 billion industry within the next 5 years. I mean, that's huge. And I see also, I'll share that, you know, a lot of the mystery of medical sales is being demystified, right? I mean, you have our podcast. You know, when we started, there were like 6 or 7 medical sales podcasts. Now there's over 38. So quickly people are, you know, putting the knowledge out there that, hey, there's a whole career, you know, behind the sales and the business of medicine and medical devices. When you think about neuromodulation and the flood of interest, what would you say people that are listening right now and are like, wow, I would do anything to do what Blake is doing? What would you say they need to bring to the table to even be considered in a space like this? What should they, you know, character wise, skills wise, what should they be able to bring to the table?
I say no matter, not just neuromodulation, sales in general, or anything you do in life, passion is by far the absolute most important thing that there is. People will see that. I mean, if I got up here and during our talk, I was like, oh yeah, neuromodulation is cool. Like nobody's gonna, like, your physicians
Right.
aren't gonna believe that. Your patients aren't gonna be excited about
Right.
that. So for me, passion is first and foremost. And then once again, I preach on the authenticity, because I think that is what has separated myself from certain reps. We had competitors in our territory, and people would say things and they wouldn't follow through with it. And for me, like I told you before, I'm an authentic guy. What you see is what you get. So I think those two things are huge, but there is a level, I won't dismiss that skill is important. So being able to, but there's ways to hone those skills ahead of time, having conversations with people like you and your success. And so for me, that content has been very beneficial in progressing my career.
Excellent. Last thing I'll say before we go to our lightning round, you know, what I love about you, Blake, is you seem like a man of intention. You kind of have a mission to go out there and do something every day. Share with us whatever that is. What is your guiding light? Like, why is it that you are able to run a family, run this position, be a nurse, and step into this space and give it your best day in, day out? What is your driving force?
I'd say my dad. You know, when we were when I was thinking about this conversation, I was like, if Samuel comes along with how did you get where you are, like who do you look up to? I was like, I already know the answer to that. So my dad, it was in sales when I was growing up, not medical device. What I say is funny is he probably put a ton of Oreos on all y'all supermarket shelves. He worked for Nabisco at the time. He
All
was a
right.
sales
All
rep for
right.
there.
All
So as
right.
a kid, that is the coolest thing.
Oh man, he was
Yeah,
the man. He was the
yeah,
man.
yeah, it was fantastic. But he was always those things that I said. He was very passionate. You know, if you think that I'm a passionate, high energy guy, he's like me times infinity. He's
Wow.
very much up there, but he cares and he's been authentic my whole life. That's what I had seen, and to me that was important. And so that's been my driving force to be a good dad and like take the late flights home or the late flight to get where I got to get to so I can pick up my kids from school, or the red eye in the morning to make sure I get back in time for this and that. So,
Wow.
and funny enough, my dad checks on me every day. He
Wow.
gives me a Bible verse first thing in the morning, and then if he
Wow.
knows I'm traveling, he'll text me like, "Where are you at right now? I'm
Come
gonna say a
on.
prayer for you before you land or whatever."
Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
yeah, he's fantastic. So I think, like I said, surrounding yourself with those kind of people is incredibly important.
Couldn't be said better. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right. Are you ready for the lightning round, Blake?
I'll do my best.
All right. I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You got less than 10 seconds to answer each one. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, first question, what's the best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Best book. I got to be honest. If we're gonna be authentic, I'm not a huge reader, not a big reader.
Fair enough. So, an article,
So if we're looking
newspaper,
at articles,
magazine.
I'll read any sports related article there is out there, like anything related to how these athletes came up from hard knock lives.
Yep.
Those are my favorite articles.
All right.
Book wise though, it's just I think my mind runs a mile a minute, and I'll start a book and I'll get like halfway through, and then I'm on to something else.
I get
So
it, man. Maybe you're a writer. You know, in the
I
future,
could be,
you're a writer.
that could be it.
All right. Best TV show or movie you've seen in the last 6 months?
I would have to say my favorite TV show, which has not been picked back up. So if Netflix is listening or whoever's listening, was Archive 81. I don't know if you've ever heard of
I've
that.
never even heard of it. What is that?
It is fantastic. It's kind of like a psychological thriller, a little bit of
That's my favorite genre, by the way. Psychological thrillers.
You got to check it out.
Archive 8.
Archive
Where is it streaming?
Netflix.
And is it a sci-fi or is it?
Yeah, it's very very much sci-fi, and I don't want to try to do it a disservice and explain it, but it is such a good show. And I was just like, there's so many Gossip Girl and all these things get renewed, and I can't get to the second season of Archive 81. Like, help me out, Netflix. So that would be my top choice.
Hopefully they catch this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. What's the best meal you've had? It can be restaurant or home cooked if that's true. What's the best meal you've had in the last 6 months?
Well, I will say my wife is a phenomenal cook. She can cook anything, but I haven't been home a lot for her to cook for me. But so I just got back from New York, as I mentioned.
All right.
And we were able to go out with one of our surgeons that was there. And so he's from Rome, like awesome Italian guy. And he took us to an Italian restaurant in New York. And so, like, I'm not a fancy guy. Like, I grew up in a very small town in West Virginia, but he was ordering all the legit stuff, oxtail and like all these different things.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it was good. We went to a place called Lupa, which is, I guess it's all the Greek mythology about the she-wolf and Roma and Ramas, as he explained, but it was phenomenal.
Wow.
He
What's it called? Say it one more time.
Lupa, Lupa. It's
LUPA.
in New York, not too far. I was working at the Columbia University. So
okay, so Lupa next to Columbia University. Is there a recommended dish?
Well, I will say that he was not a fan of their tiramisu. It was not correct. So that was one thing. But what I liked the most, oh gosh, I can't remember the words. Like it was so weird. Each dish was like one word, but it meant something. Was like one was meant burned your finger, because it was like a lamb.
Wow.
It was, and the bone is hot, so when you touch it, you burn yourself. It's
man, this place sounds like it got a lot of culture behind it.
Oh yeah, very much so. I apologize to him, if he's listening to this, because I cannot remember the name. That lamb dish was one of the best things I've ever had. It was delicious.
So that's going to the show notes, everyone. Lupa in New York, next to Columbia University.
Yeah.
I love it.
And tell them you want the thing that burns your finger.
The thing that burns your finger.
Yeah.
Last question. What's the best experience you've had in the last 6 months?
I would have to say best experience I've had in the last 6 months. It's just been everything that I've been doing with this job in the realm. I never thought I would meet all these people that I've met. Like I keep on harping on it. So the name of the town that I grew up in is Big Ugly. I ain't making that up. That's
wow, like it's called Big Ugly?
Oh yeah.
That's a first.
You can look that up. So,
wow, okay.
Yeah, Big Ugly, West Virginia. So my parents didn't go to college. And, when I was growing up, a lot of what you would end up with was coal mines or going to the military. There wasn't a huge college push for that. My parents pushed me to go. But never in a million years did I think I'd be working for a big corporation and traveling like I'm traveling, meeting all these executive leadership people and these positions. So I've been doing a lot of that in the last 6 months. The FCE role I've been in for about 10, but it's been great.
Man, what a blessing.
Absolutely.
Well, Blake, it's been fantastic having you on the show today. You are someone we will definitely be continuing to watch. So thank you for the time and keep doing your amazing work.
All right, sir. Well, thank you very much for letting me be part of this. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing your next podcast.
Absolutely. And that was Blake Williams. Fascinating story. What I love about Blake is if you listen to that episode, it's as if he's just getting started. And to already have the trajectory he's had, it's a wonderful thing to hear. So maybe you're listening to this episode right now and you're thinking to yourself, I want to do what Blake's doing. I want to be in Blake's space, whether it be neuromodulation, whether it be being a field sales trainer in a different space or field, or whether it be joining a team that's on the cutting edge of medical device sales or pharmaceutical sales or any other type of medical sales. Well, what I want to ask you to do right now is challenge yourself to take a step. So often in life, we have these ambitions and these things we want to do. Sometimes we write it down. Sometimes we tell friends and family. Sometimes we just wake up and wish it would be every single morning. Well, this time I'm asking you and I'm inviting you to take a step because we have a program called the Medical Sales Career Builder that was created to turn your wishes into a reality, to turn your frustrations into success, to turn your ambitions into a career. So stop wondering and thinking and dwelling and contemplating and take that step. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select the application button for the Medical Sales Career Builder program, fill out that application, set up a time, and have a discussion with one of our account executives. And let us show you how we can take the dream you have right this very moment and make it your reality. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that are doing things just a little bit differently in the medical sales space. So make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.